Good morning, beautiful people of the Center for Spiritual Living. I am Edward Fillion, and I requested that song for this morning for a reason that I will address in just a little while. But I love the words, all we need is love. I'd like to maybe play with them a little bit and say, perhaps it's more accurate to say all we have is love, or perhaps to say all we are is love, and that every frustration and difficulty and hardship in our world is a result of a frustrated attempt to express that love. So our work then is to get to a place where we realign with who we are so that we clear the glass that we are looking at life through of all the grime so that we can begin to see it as we believe it really is. Only love. Our topic this morning is sowing seeds of abundance for the whole month, actually. And the focus this morning is on consistency in practice. This practice of clearing the way to see through into the world in a loving way. So I'd like to begin with an oldie but goodie, since we're doing that this morning. An old favorite prayer that perhaps you may have read on the internet or received in your email. It goes like this. Dear Lord, so far today I'm doing all right. I have not gossiped, not lost my temper, not been greedy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or overindulgent. However, I'm going to get out of bed in a few minutes. And I'm going to need a lot more help after that. Amen. You know, there are a couple of things to look at from our perspective as a New Thought tradition, because that's what we are, as relates to that particular prayer. For example, right in that prayer, I'm going to get up in the morning and here's where I'm going, so I'm going to need help. I call that planned failure. Describing the worst case possibilities and then asking for help instead of taking responsibility. And from my perspective in life, challenges actually, they happen all by themselves without my help. So I don't have to worry about predicting them in my prayer time and describing them. That's the first thing. The second thing from a New Thought perspective has to do with our concept of God. You see, the prayer begins with, Dear God, addressing God. Well, in the New Thought tradition, we don't so much say that God exists. We say God is existence. We don't so much say that God lives. We say that God is life, as you heard in the prayer, expressing as every molecule, every idea, every time, every space, everywhere, in every prayer, as every prayer. So there isn't anything to address. There's nowhere to send the prayer to that is any different from where you are. So we think of our prayers then not so much as petitions or requests, but as expressions of the very energy of life in a certain direction. We think of it as participating in the very creative activity of that one divine, infinite presence in and through everything that we sang about this morning. Everywhere present. We're participating, not requesting. So I try to keep that in mind when I pray. I don't want to start off in the morning by planning out my failure. I don't want to start out in the morning by requesting help for something I'm certain to fail in. Because that's how I was brought up in prayer. I was brought up to learn to pray this way. Begin by telling God all my problems. Describe them so that it is adequately understood how much I'm suffering, and then ask for help. Well, I learned a new way. I heard this idea that there's a new way to pray, and it goes like this. Rather, start each morning participating with the very creative fabric in the universe, and to the best of my ability, choose the direction according to the free will that I have, and then feel it as best as I can, think about it as clearly as I can, express it and embody it, and then get out of bed and follow that direction. And then let the spiritual laws that govern the universe conspire to support me in that direction. Which spiritual laws? Well, for example, this one that goes like this, that what I think about in my mind tends to increase in my experience. We call that the law of mind. Or how about this? That which I praise in my mind tends to raise up in value in my experience. We call that the law of increase, or the law of gratitude. Or how about this one? What goes around in my mind tends to come around in my experience. We call that the law of reciprocity, and so on. And so I don't have to beg the law to do what it does. I just have to get up in the morning and start again. Not use my prayer time to plan my failure. Because failure is part of life, and it does very well all by itself. I said I'd bring you some examples of failure, so I did. For example, Richard Branson of Virgin, when he started, he had several failures on the way to establishing his career. I mean, who's ever heard of Virgin Cola? Or Virgin credit cards? Well, a few of us, but they weren't exactly successes. And I don't think that he went into it planning for them to not succeed. I'm inspired by the story because I imagine him saying, well, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go in a new direction. I'm going to express something new out of the infinite possibility that one all-pervading power must be. I'm going to start again in the morning. And I've learned from stories like that to have an unquenchable spirit. Why not try again? Authors, especially first-time authors who submit books to publishers, they know what that can be like. As many well-known authors have been rejected repeatedly, and thank God they carrying on, because we wouldn't have some great classics. The first one, Dr. Seuss. 27 times rejected. Thank God he carried on. John Grisham, 28 rejections. Stephen King, 30 times rejected. In fact, he got to a point where he was so frustrated with the constant hurdles to jump over and barriers to get, he threw Carrie into the garbage. It was his wife who dug it out and said, no, you've got to keep on going. And, I guess we can say I'm glad she did, because now we have Carrie. Or how about the author of the series, the Twilight series, submitted it, I think it was 15 times, and 5 of those didn't even bother to respond. And another 9 said absolutely no. And there was just one who said maybe, started looking into it, and good thing that they did, because it started a bidding war in which she earned herself something like $40 million. And then, of course, the reason for today's music, the Beatles, rejected by many a label. In fact, there is the well-known rejection letter that goes something like this. Guitar groups are on the way out. And the Beatles have no future in show music. And so it wasn't. And there's one more that I'm particularly grateful that he kept on keeping on, because had he not kept on submitting his work, I would not finally have found one of his subsequent works and followed it with consistency and learned a lot about it and lost 22 pounds. I'm talking about Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Body. You see, what happened was, last year when we had all that trouble when we discovered the embezzlement and we did all the work we had to do and all the legality to fix it all up, I didn't notice that I was doing what people frequently do when they're stressed, eating a lot. I think sometimes we do that to create a buffer of protection maybe between us and the world. And then, next thing I knew, it was very difficult for me to run around Spring Lake like I used to enjoy. And, and then one day I put on these very trousers, and split the seam right down the side. And, if I want a sign from the universe, that's a sign. And I thought to myself, well, knowing what I know about consistency, I ought to look for something and dedicate myself to it to see if I can adjust and change this trajectory. And so I found, after looking around, I found Tim Ferriss's book. And keep in mind, he had been rejected 26 times by other publishers for his first book. So I found it, and I really followed the plan consistently, and in so doing, I lost the 22 pounds. And there was something in that plan that relates to this spiritual practice and consistency that really worked for me very well. And it's that built into it, like many other plans have, there is what I call a Sabbath. In other words, time out. One day a week, you get a binge day, where you can eat anything that you want, and I like that. Because I don't like to suffer. If anything is too strict as an approach, if it's too uncompromising, it's a turn-off to me, and I won't do it. If something is too rigid, then my reactive mind kicks in, and I will go in the opposite direction, even of my highest good. Do you know that approach? There's a brat in me. Now, this is the same if it's for diets, or if it's for exercise, or if it's for journaling practices, or if it's for meditation, or if it's prayer. I have to have a system that works for me. And so this worked for me. 6 days on, 1 day off. Do it again. 6 days on, 1 day off. Repeat. And so there is a consistent rhythm, a pattern, and over time, sticking to it, I was able to regain my normal weight. Rhythm is the key in this regard. Rhythm means a predictable pattern, so you can see and sense where the next one is going to fall. That's what rhythm means. It's the opposite in this regard to random. Everything that I have done randomly, or everything that I've done sporadically or on a I'll do it when I feel like it basis, has yielded exactly that kind of response. The result has been wishy-washy, hard to detect the progress in it. Since the theme is sowing seeds of abundance, I was wondering what I could use for an example, and what came to mind is my developing relationship with giving. In the beginning, I used to give to charity on a when I feel like it basis. So, for example, if the speaker was good, or if the charity contacted me. And as a result, I didn't really have that deep relationship to my generous heart or to the world. It sort of was fluctuating along with my giving practice. And then I heard this teaching that said consciousness grows with consistency, and I began to apply it to my various practices, including my giving. So I developed a practice of regular, structured giving, so it was dependable and on a rhythm. And as a result of that, I started to drop deep roots into my world and have a sense of my place in the scheme of things and discover my generous heart. So a rhythm is something you can predict. Like, for example, for me, it's once a week. It could be once a month. If the distance between occurrences starts to get erratic or too far, it starts to lose what the power of rhythm can bring. Consistent rhythm. So I want to do an exercise with you. I'm going to clap my hands 5 times. And I want you to clap with me on the 5th time. Okay? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. Let's do that again, shall we? There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of you can't be counted on. Thank you for allowing me that little humor, but you get the point. It changes the dynamic of our engagement even with each other. You see, with rhythm, it's easy. And when ease is present, there's an openness in us and a joy for participation. And when that openness is present, we are free to flourish. Without rhythm, well, then it requires, well, there's more effort. Thinking is engaged. And when effort is present, then that reduces the free flow of things. And with reduced flow, well, that's the opposite of abundance. In the book that we are using this year, A New Design for Living, this is the old cover, the new cover is slightly different. In the chapter assigned to this month, he talks about consistency also in the way we deal with our vision. And he tells the story that I mentioned last week of the man who starts in the morning, like our prayer from this morning, dear Lord, very clear on his vision for success in his business. But no sooner has he left for work, he starts to let his thought travel to the people who are not coming into his business. So he abandons his vision. And that's a reminder about consistency, because sometimes people think of prayer as that moment between dear God and amen. But instead, we are being invited to think of prayer as setting the direction, and it doesn't end with, and so it is, because now we become the living embodiment of the direction of the prayer, and it extends into our day. He says we ought to match our prayers, our words, our actions, our mood, our feelings to that vision. Because if one of those is out of sync with the other, I've got the vision but the words are angry, then what happens, he calls it civil war happens. Internally, civil war happens, sometimes externally too. And that's the topic of next week's message, how to prevent internal civil war. But let me return to the life lessons I learned from being on diet for the past 3 months. I learned from the book that it is inconsistent to have a vision of losing weight while at the same time keeping candy bars and sodas in the pantry. He calls that kind of food avalanche food. You know what I'm talking about? You take the first bite and you're going down because you can't just have one. And I was able to apply that to my own spiritual work, my work in consciousness. It's inconsistent to have a vision for how I want to be in the world and then keep a few things that have an avalanche effect. So I'm learning to place myself in environments, to have conversations, to embark on activities that raise me up in the direction of my heart's desire, that lift me up. And I'm learning that it also takes a decision to stick with it, to stick with your inner work, and to not abandon yourself. I was reading on a blog about successful living where the author, a young man, had this statement. It says, "How bad do you want to achieve your goal? It better be so bad that rejection won't derail you." Well, there's something in that, except I would work with it like I worked with the prayer, and I would take out all of the clinging. Instead of how bad you want it, I might ask myself, how well do I want it? I might even drop wanting. I might say it like this, find what, can I say, find what turns you on. Find what opens your heart. Find what brightens your mind, because whatever that is, when you're in it, wherever it takes you, including failures along the way, you're going to be in joy. And when we are in joy, we can put up with a lot of stuff. I can't give this message without quoting the famous Edison quote. If I find 10,000 ways something won't work, I haven't failed. I'm not discouraged, because every wrong step discarded is another step forward. Every wrong step discarded is part of life. I'm still going on. Why not try again? And why not try again? And often it is the case that I have to do that in little bits. Like, for example, if I wake up in the morning and I choose the direction, today I choose to love my body, then my work is to hold that somewhere in my mental pocket, not tightly, but to repeat it maybe from time to time, because it is the way of things that if that is on my mind, the universe conspires to show me other related ways of accomplishing that. I might remind myself maybe with a timer to just read the statement again, now and then throughout the day. And then, according to the spiritual laws, what I think upon seems to multiply in my experience, and what I appreciate seems to raise in value in my experience. It's the way of things. I'm not talking about obsessing on an idea or repeating with fervor and anguish and affirmation to try drive it through the unwilling universe. I'm not talking about worrying about something. I heard a speaker once say that worrying is the negative use of prayer. The idea is that mind is your creative use of the energy, the divine energy of life, and according to your freedom, whether you use it to worry or to wonder, there's no judgment. So I have to learn to disengage from the cultural training that says it is important and valuable to worry and describe what I'm going to do wrong. That's been a life journey. I'm not denying that things go wrong. They do. Some examples of failure. Winston Churchill. Do you know that he was defeated in every single election for public office that he ever ran for before he became Prime Minister of England? And he failed the 5th grade, or 6th grade, I think. And yet he was able to win a Nobel Prize. Oprah Winfrey, fired from her job as a TV reporter with the comment, she's not well suited to television. Unfit, they said, for TV. Jerry Seinfeld, first appearance as a stand-up comic, he was so afraid. He went and he stood at the microphone and he froze. And he was booed off the stage by the audience. He didn't utter a word. He had to practice with a laugh track to get used to it. Fred Astaire, surely you know about his screen test. The famous words, can't act, can't sing, slightly bald, can dance a little. Elvis Presley. Oh yeah, he was fired from the Grand Ole, how do you say that? Opry, sorry, American Opry. With these words, I'll try to say it in your accent. You ain't going nowhere, son. You ought to go back to driving a truck. It's a reminder to me that I must be cautious not to trust the testimony of the group mind. They may be wrong. Why not try again? Every morning, why not start again in the direction of my choosing? Why not try again and again and again? Gertrude Stein did. for 20 years. 20 years she submitted poems to editors, and not one was accepted. 20 years before the first one was noticed. Sir James Dyson, who invented the vacuum cleaner thing with the proprietary vacuum thingy in it. Well, it took him 15 years to get it right. And in that 15 years, he had 5,126 failed prototypes. All of this false starts and failures along the road, it reminds me about commitment and sticking with it, and how consistency leads to deepened consciousness, may I even say success in the presence of all the failure. It's all part of the same thing. And spirituality is like that. False starts in the prayer practice, in the meditation. It can happen. And it'll help me to separate spirituality from superstition and wishing and hoping, so that I don't think of spirituality as this magic pill. You offer up one prayer between dear God and amen, and then hope that it gets to where it's going and that you get a favorable response. That's not worked well for me. Rather, spirituality then becomes life, a way of life, an attitude of life, in which you see yourself as participating with the revealing of our world. So spirituality then is your creativity, your creative use of the all-pervading presence. And to trust it, you have to be familiar with it. And to practice it means you have to do it consistently over and over again. And to depend on it, you have to have a relationship with it. It means starting every day, awake, consciously choosing and developing a relationship with life. It means remembering this. I am using my mind to participate in creation by revealing something new every single day. Now, I don't think we will all become Oprah Winfrey's. I don't think we'll all become Dysons or Elvis Presley's. We don't need to. We need to just become ourselves. Maybe your greatest work is to love your grandchild. Or maybe your greatest work is to succeed in getting up every morning feeling a little bit better about yourself or in your body. Maybe your greatest work is to, you fill in the blank. And I want to invite you to consider being loyal to that and going for it, whatever it is, and to stay the course with it for as long as you want to stay the course, and to be true to what is important to you, because you matter. And thereby to prove that your mind is indeed the maker of your world, not with stress, not with clinging, not with effort, not with bad wanting, but with the joy of someone who knows that God is life, my life, right now. So I would take that prayer that we started with, the Dear God prayer, and I would reframe it for myself with words that match our New Thought tradition to go something like this. From the awareness of the all-pervading presence of the One within me and around me, I declare that so far I am doing all right. And by my word and my mood and through my generosity and my kindness, I continue in that direction. And as I get out of bed, I set out this morning in that brand new direction with the accompanying energy to express it. Because my life is an adventure of discovery through the power of the all-pervading presence which expresses itself through me. And so it is. That's what I would do, you see? Yeah. I'm glad you agree. Shall we pray? Let us take a breath together. And exhaling, if it is comfortable for you to close your eyes, we do that merely to focus a little more without stress on these thoughts of an all-pervading presence. In this way, we honor and salute it, not as something distant, but something imminent, present, right here. We feel together the holiness of the moment in which we recognize that that mystical creation is taking place through us. And it strips from us all thoughts, ideas, and tendencies that would hypnotize us into thinking that we are separate or apart from the only thing that has ever mattered. So from this consciousness, then, we declare, success is assured because it's the way of things. And I am learning to select my direction and support my journey, and in that way, I am free to love the world, support it, contribute to it, and experience it with awe and wonder. I give thanks for this, that there are spiritual laws that govern the universe that I don't need to create. And having done this part of my spiritual work, I joyfully enter into the next phase, which is to embody and act out what I have prayed. And together we say, and so it is. And once again, a breath in and a sigh. We do that just to begin to move again and also to build a bridge to that part of our service where we share together. Ushers, won't you stand? And won't you take your gift in your hand, and perhaps you're giving once a month, or perhaps you're holding a coupon that shows that you're part of the auto teller ministry, or perhaps you've put cash in an envelope, or whatever way you're participating, you might consider placing your hand on your chest to represent your contribution and say with me, I bless this gift. I send it forth to heal and prosper. It does great work in the world and blesses creation. And so it is. Ushers, will you please receive the gift? Thank you.